Everyone's talking about what happened when Charlie Kirk got shot at Utah Valley University. But here's what they're not telling you. There were conflicting early statements from the very beginning. At 12:10 p.m., a single shot rang out. University officials said it appeared to come from the nearby Losi Center, though sources reported different distances. Social media videos show Kirk recoiling, blood streaming from his neck. But then something strange happened. Initial local reports suggested they had a suspect in custody. Then university officials clarified no suspect was actually detained. The campus closed around 12:37 p.m., but nearly 2 hours later at 2:01 p.m., students were told to secure in place. Federal agents arrived, but no arrests were made. What really happened in those crucial first hours? The gaps in the timeline raise questions that go beyond just this incident. The security gap nobody wants to talk about. The security arrangements tell their own story. Multiple attendees said there were no metal detectors and that ticket QR codes printed at home weren't checked at entry. People walked straight through the main entrance of the Losi Center without any screening whatsoever. Now think about this for a second. Charlie Kirk isn't just some random speaker. He's one of the most polarizing political figures in America today. His appearances draw protests, counter-protests, and heated confrontations. In the current climate of political violence, you'd expect serious security protocols around someone like that. But that's not what happened. One witness near the front described being shocked by how easy it was to enter. They expected at least bag checks or barcode scans, but none occurred. Students and community members streamed through the doors carrying backpacks, purses, and whatever else they wanted to bring inside. This raises questions about how many universities treat controversial campus speakers. Most rely on standard campus event protocols designed for student activities, not for figures who attract national attention and controversy. Utah Valley University had already received petitions and public pressure about Kirk's appearance, with student groups demanding the university cancel his speaking engagement. Yet despite these warning signs, security remained minimal. Compare this to other political events happening around the same time. Presidential campaign stops involve multiple security perimeters, metal detectors, bag searches, and coordinated law enforcement from local, state, and federal agencies. Even lower-profile political figures often travel with private security teams and request enhanced venue protection. Two explanations seem plausible. Either university events typically use standard campus protocols regardless of the speaker's profile, or the ticketed event wasn't rigorously managed by staff, as witness accounts suggest. Social media discussions about the event had included heated exchanges and threats of disruption, yet the university proceeded with routine security measures. Here's where this security gap becomes concerning. The shooter didn't need to breach perimeter security or overcome detection systems. They didn't need to smuggle anything past metal detectors or fool trained security personnel. The lack of meaningful screening meant the real challenge wasn't getting weapons near the venue. Instead, the challenge was positioning for the shot itself. The shooter had to access a separate building, reach an elevated position, and maintain a clear line of sight to the speaking area. This required advanced planning and knowledge of the campus layout. The lack of perimeter security around the Losi Center meant that potential threat positions weren't being monitored or secured. Buildings within shooting range of the venue weren't being watched or restricted. It's like securing the front entrance while leaving the back door wide open. The security measures weren't matching the actual threat profile. This security failure creates two uncomfortable possibilities. Either university officials severely underestimated the threat level, or there were institutional reasons why enhanced security wasn't implemented despite the obvious risks. The shooter could position themselves without anyone checking those locations for threats. But here's what makes this even more significant. The positioning required for this attack reveals something crucial about both planning and opportunity. The 200-yard question. The shot's origin tells us what kind of attack this was. University officials said it appeared to come from the Losey Center, roughly 200 feet away from where Kirk was speaking. Early conflicting reports gave varying distances, but multiple cell phone videos corroborate a single distant shooter with a clear line of sight to the stage. The vantage point, a rooftop roughly 200 feet away, makes this look like a planned shot. It implies the shooter needed to choose a specific location with line of sight to the stage, then access that building without being detected during an active campus event. Think about what the shooter had to accomplish. They needed to get to a rooftop position while people were moving around campus. They had to maintain a clear view of the speaking area while remaining hidden from the crowd below. And they needed to time everything perfectly with Kirk's appearance on stage. The location choice wasn't random. The Losey Center provided the ideal vantage point for this specific target. The building height, the angle to the speaking platform, the cover from surrounding structures, everything had to align for this shot to be possible. Campus architecture doesn't typically favor long-distance shooting positions. Most university buildings are designed to blend into the landscape and provide multiple sight lines for pedestrian traffic. But certain combinations of building height and positioning create what security experts call commanding views of target areas. The shot's origin raises questions about scouting and access to the building. Investigations typically look at whether attackers had prior opportunity to reconnoiter vantage points. Someone planning this kind of attack would need to understand which buildings provide unobstructed views of the venue and how to access those positions without drawing attention. Here's what's interesting about the technical requirements. A shot from this distance requires more than just showing up with a weapon. The shooter had to account for factors like wind conditions, target movement, and the angle from an elevated position. This suggests either advanced practice or familiarity with precision shooting. But here's where it gets strange. Despite evidence pointing to this level of planning and premeditation, the investigation seemed to lose its primary lead within hours of the incident. How does someone carry out such a carefully planned attack, yet somehow slip away from law enforcement's initial response? The contradiction is striking. On one hand, you have evidence of extensive preparation. The shooter had to scout locations, access secure areas, and position themselves with precision timing. On the other hand, you have an investigation that appears to have stalled or gone underground despite federal agents arriving on scene quickly. Standard protocol in cases involving this level of premeditation would be to secure all potential escape routes, canvass the surrounding area for witnesses, and maintain custody of any suspects until their involvement could be definitively ruled out. Federal involvement suggests authorities recognized the significance of the attack, yet no arrests were announced and no clear timeline was provided to the public. The technical requirements for this shot, combined with the perfect positioning choice, indicate someone with either extensive planning time or access to information about the event logistics. Who scouted those rooftops and who checked them afterward? This suggests one of two possibilities. Either the shooter had inside knowledge of the venue layout and security protocols, allowing them to plan such a precise attack and escape, or someone in a position of authority failed to secure obvious threat positions despite having advance warning about potential violence. The evidence points to careful preparation, yet the official response seemed to unravel almost immediately. The vanishing suspect. Within hours, early local alerts and TV reports suggested someone had been detained. Campus police appeared to confirm they were questioning someone in connection with the shooting. For about 3 hours, it looked like the case might have a quick resolution. But university spokespeople later said no suspect was in custody and the person questioned was released. The arrest that had been reported across local media suddenly never happened. This creates a timeline worth examining. The campus closed around 12:37 p.m., but students weren't told to secure in place until 2:01 p.m. Why did those messages change over time? If authorities had someone in custody, why lock down the campus nearly 2 hours later? If they didn't have a suspect, Why the delay in recognizing the campus might still be in danger? Footage and witness reports showed police escorting someone away in handcuffs who was later determined not to be the shooter. This explains how early visual impressions fed mistaken reports, but it raises questions about the coordination between agencies responding to the scene. The federal response adds another layer. FBI Director Kash Patel confirmed agents would be on scene, with the FBI and ATF assisting the investigation. Federal involvement like this is consistent with how high-profile politically related shootings are handled. When cases involve national political figures, they typically get elevated to the highest priority level. But despite this federal presence, no arrests were announced, no suspects were named, no clear timeline of events was provided to the public. The federal investigators seemed to arrive quickly, and then the public messaging remained unclear. Social media footage from that day shows a rapid police response, with officers deployed to surrounding neighborhoods. You can see patrol cars racing through residential areas near campus. Officers were searching backyards, checking abandoned buildings, and setting up roadblocks on streets leading away from the university. This kind of response pattern suggests they were actively pursuing someone. Police don't deploy those kinds of resources unless they have specific intelligence about where a suspect might be heading. The search perimeter they established covered several square miles around the campus. The timing suggests that something significant happened between 12:10 p.m. and 2:01 p.m. that changed how authorities viewed the threat level. Either they realized their suspect wasn't the right person, or they discovered new information that made them think the danger wasn't over. These conflicting public statements and shifting alerts deserve scrutiny. Several explanations are possible. Coordination issues between multiple agencies responding to a fast-moving situation could explain the mixed messaging. Information was changing rapidly as investigators gathered evidence and interviewed witnesses. Alternatively, there might be investigative reasons to withhold information from the public while the case remains active. When investigations involve sensitive political implications, the normal flow of information to reporters gets restricted. Facts that would normally be shared get classified or withheld pending further investigation. The result is a public narrative that keeps shifting as different agencies release different versions of what happened. But the pattern raises questions about what authorities knew about potential threats before the shooting occurred. The disconnect between the extensive security response and the lack of clear public information suggests there's more to this story than what's been officially disclosed. The threats they never mentioned. Mainstream coverage emphasized the shooting, eyewitness video, and political reactions while giving less airtime to pre-event threat assessments and private security arrangements. What they didn't highlight is that Kirk had been traveling with private security for months before this incident. Public figures don't hire personal protection without specific, credible threats to their safety. Think about it like this. When you see a celebrity with bodyguards at a restaurant, you don't assume they're just being paranoid. You assume someone has made credible threats against them. Professional security costs serious money and creates logistical headaches wherever you go. Nobody takes on that burden unless they have to. Kirk is a high-profile, polarizing speaker who regularly draws protests and is allied with top political figures. His controversial statements on gender roles and cultural issues had made him a target for protests at multiple universities. His speaking appearances regularly drew counter-protesters who viewed his messages as harmful to marginalized communities. Campus visits that should have been routine academic discussions turned into security challenges requiring advanced planning and crowd control. The pattern of escalating confrontations had been building for months. Social media platforms buzzed with heated discussions whenever Kirk announced a new campus appearance. Student organizations mobilized opposition campaigns. University administrators found themselves caught between free speech obligations and campus safety concerns. Turning Point USA and Utah Valley University had already seen heated reactions and petitions in advance of this event. A disconnect becomes obvious when you compare threat assessment procedures. Federal protective services use sophisticated analysis to evaluate potential dangers against public figures. They consider social media chatter, previous incidents, local political climate, and specific intelligence about planned disruptions. Campus security operates more like event management, focused on crowd control rather than personal protection. Kirk's speaking tour had faced disruptions at previous stops, yet this information was largely kept out of public reporting. Media coverage focused on the content of his speeches and the reactions they generated. The security challenges, the threats being received, and the protective measures being taken remained largely invisible to the general public. Here's what makes this significant. When news outlets report on political speakers facing protests, they typically frame it as a free speech issue or a cultural controversy. They don't usually investigate the behind-the-scenes security concerns that might be driving decisions about venue selection, event timing, or protective measures. The result is a public that doesn't understand the actual threat environment surrounding controversial political figures. People see the protests and the heated rhetoric, but they don't see the specific threats, the security assessments, or the protective protocols being implemented to keep speakers safe. There's a reason Kirk's team was concerned enough to hire private security, and it wasn't just general precaution. Professional threat assessment had identified specific risks that warranted enhanced protection. These weren't vague concerns about political opposition or typical campus protests. These were concrete threats, serious enough to justify the expense and complexity of personal protection. Yet a documented disconnect existed between federal and organizational threat concerns that justified private security alongside campus-level event protocols that looked more like standard campus events, according to witness accounts. Someone knew there were credible dangers, but that knowledge didn't translate into appropriate security measures at the venue level. This gap between known threats and provided security points to institutional failure in coordination. Either the university wasn't properly informed about the threat level, or standard campus protocols weren't designed to handle high-risk political events. Neither explanation reflects well on the decision-making process that left Kirk vulnerable to attack. Family and audience members were present and affected that day, and officials across the political spectrum urged prayers. The missing piece in media coverage isn't just what happened during those crucial minutes. It's the months of escalating threats and security concerns that preceded the shooting, creating conditions that made such an attack predictable. Conclusion. The evidence raises three concrete questions that merit transparency and investigation. First, where exactly did the shot originate? University officials said the Losi Center roughly 200 feet away, but early reports gave conflicting distances. Second, why were initial custody and alert messages inconsistent? Someone was detained then released. Campus closed at 12:37 p.m., but secure in place wasn't issued until 2:01 p.m. Third, why didn't venue screening and rooftop monitoring match the apparent threat level that justified private security? If you witnessed anything that day or have local footage, share it in the comments. Subscribe if you want evidence-based follow-ups on cases like this. Most importantly, keep the victims and their families in your thoughts as these questions get answered. The procedural gaps documented here affect public safety and accountability. That makes transparency a matter of public interest, not just political curiosity.